Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the International Mentoring Community All Things Mentoring Lounge, brought to you by mentorpractices.com. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. With me is Doug Lawrence. We're involved with Mentor Practices and the IMC, and we're going to be sharing today 5 personal qualities of a mentor. And this came about because someone asked us about it in terms of mental health and solo aging and a lot of issues that are unfolding in the world. And they wanted to just get a little bit better idea about what would be some of the personal qualities of a mentor. So we came up with 5. We've got a diagram that we're going to share with you, but we're going to add 2 more as well. You could think of them as bonuses. I think they're just a little bit more outside of the 5 core ones that we're going to talk about, and yet they sort of envelop these 5, the 2 that we have. And so that's where we're going today. We're planning on somewhere around 30 minutes or so for the broadcast. And as we always do, we're going to do a quick introduction of ourselves. We're just going to share a quick definition of mentoring that we tend to use, so that we have a bit of a grounding about what's possible here for all of us. And then we're going to get into it. Now, just to let you know, Doug doesn't know some of the questions I'm going to be asking him. I'm going to treat this more like he does a lot of podcasting around mentoring and mental health. And I didn't want him to know ahead of time where we're going, what we're doing. So he accepted the challenge. And so I'm just going to acknowledge that. So if there's a little bit of pause between me asking a question and him responding, it's because of that feature. So with that, Doug, you want to just introduce yourself in terms of what we're doing from an IMC Mentor Practices point of view?
Yeah, I certainly can. So I'm Doug Lawrence, and I am the Director of Practice and Outreach with IMC/Mentor Practices. And I have my own company, Talent C, which is focused on all things mentoring. And a huge component of that is the mental health space.
And Dr. Stephen Hobbs here. I am the Director of Education Certification for IMC. I have my own company, Wealth Movement, WELLTH. I do a little bit of mentoring over there, but not as deep of practice as what Doug does. Yet I do a lot of the background education work and make sure the certification process works for us. Doug, you want to share the definition of mentoring that we tend to use?
So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and develop together.
And anything in particular you want to emphasize today?
Well, typically, I'm still a huge proponent of the trusted relationship and what that can mean to, both in the mentoring space and in the mental health space. Trust is huge. It's something that has to be in place in order for the relationship to move forward.
For sure, for sure. And I think as we dive into these 5 personal qualities of a mentor, which is our topic today, it certainly plays itself out in terms of the relationship between the mentor and the mentee in the arrangement that they both set in motion. And I would offer to you listening in, watching, is again, subscribe to wherever you find yourself. And if there's a possibility of liking, that's great. Commenting is even better. We appreciate it. But the point that I want to emphasize is that while we may be talking about the mentor today, the mentor, please help assist, guide the mentee to figure out and weave these same personal qualities into their life. Because from an ethics point of view, which is about the sharing in the relationship, these words that we're going to share, these concepts and some aspects of practice today are important for both the mentor and the mentee. So don't let that slide by and think this is only for you, which means you have to figure out a way in which to bring these concepts and practices to the mentee as well. So I'm just going to share my screen because what I want to do is just bring up an important diagram that we've created. so that we have a sense of where we're going today. And here it is here, 5 personal qualities of mentor. As I mentioned earlier, we will be working with these 5, but there's 2 others that we'll go over. And to start this off, Doug, I'm just going to ask you, which of these 5 do you think we should talk about first?
When I went through and looked at these before, the one that jumped out is the caring and kindness part. That was the one that spoke to me and said that the whole aspect of if I was looking for a mentor, I would definitely want somebody who cared and cared about the outcome of the relationship and of their work with me or me with them. And then the aspect of kindness, because especially from the mental health space, is that they're dealing with so much trauma in their life that any kind of kindness that we can show definitely pays off in the end.
Yeah, and so and for a lot of people who are aging, solo aging, which is the area that I tend to lean into, this notion of self-care and just saying, hang on a minute, I may not be moving quite as quickly as I used to, or things may be, oh, hang on a minute, I need to do some adjusting. Give yourself the space, right? And to be able to do that and to show that kindness towards yourself. I think there's other things is to forgive others. There's going to be times people are going to step on your toes. You may have asked them to be your dance partner for a little while and they step on your toes. So from this caring kindness perspective, I think, forgive others. It's okay. There's no need to carry that baggage with you. And if you haven't done it because of something that took place many years ago, then it's time to do that. And I think for some mentees, when they come into a mentoring arrangement, they may find themselves there because someone may have done something, or they may have been shut out. Like I'm thinking like a promotion, for example, and they want some support from someone like you, Doug, and they find themselves in that position. And I think as a mentor is to help them understand about this notion of forgiving and forgiveness that plays itself out there. Any thoughts on that one, or an example that you may have you want to share?
Well, the one that jumps to mind for me is especially around the caring and the kindness and being respectful from a kindness perspective is working with a young person who was diagnosed as bipolar and who was prone to verbal outbursts at various times, unprovoked by me, but I was still there. I was sort of the person that channeled all that negative energy towards. And so as long as, and I guess part of, now that I'm thinking about it, part of what was causing the problem was me trying to be the mentor who could fix everything. And you can't, you could try, but it doesn't work. So the thing for me was to be able to learn to listen and hear and let the person vent to get rid of all that negative energy. And then we were in a position where we could move forward a lot better. And in that process, I was demonstrating that I actually did care. I wasn't, somebody who said, well, that, you shouldn't be that way, or, those people, they don't really matter. You just listen to me and I'll tell you. And none of that really works.
Yeah. Isn't it great, that reflection on?
Yeah.
And that's something that both Doug and I talk about a lot, is the reflection in, reflection on. And he just gave a great example there of all of a sudden there was a bit of an insight just by sharing that story. And that's wonderful. And that's one of the things as a mentor is really pay attention to, oh, hang on a minute, I need to voice that out, or I need to write about that. This is all great, all great. You mentioned the word respect. So let's go to respect. And let's take a look at it from the perspective of courtesy as well. And I'll start off here, and then I'm just going to ask you if you have a story you want to share, Doug, around respect. It tends to be one that follows very quickly from caring. I get that. This is one of the ones that it took me a while to unpack this for myself, because I was always had a tussle with fairness and respect in my life and attempting to figure it out. But when I came to understand respect and using this notion of courtesy and this idea of being accepting of differences, my story unfolded because I came out of an academic world. So sometimes I would slip into my academic speak, and I could see people just, what are you talking about? You want to bring that back down to earth, please? And I didn't always get what was going on until I started to understand, well, I wasn't necessarily being fully courteous to the other person because I was using some kind of speak that wasn't in the common sense and the common area that we interact with. And when I did that a couple of times with mentees, after leaving my mentor-mentee relationship in academics, I remembered after about 2 conversations with a mentee that I was still using that speak even with this mentee who was someone in the workplace. And again, from a reflection on perspective of, oh, right, okay, hang on a minute, I got to respect this person I'm interacting with. And that really became important, right? And there was a point there that I almost went into a bit of self-anger. And I remember that because I went, come on, you're supposed to know better than that. And I started, which went back to the caring part. That's what I mean. They're quite connected here. And I just went, no, hang on, be respectful of yourself now. And as you present, just come to be authentic, just be who you are. And, think about the other person's feelings, think about your own feelings. So I wanted to share that because this was one that really came close to me, where I almost went off the rails, jumped over the guidepost and the guide rails around it. So anything of an experience you want to share with us around that one?
Well, it's the idea of respect and courtesy, I look at that in some respects as showing up. So showing up for the mentoring engagement, when I as a mentor extend the courtesy to juggle schedules so that I can accommodate somebody who says that they need to see me, my expectation is that out of respect to me as their mentor, they're going to show up as well. And when they don't, then I've got to shuffle my deck all over again. And then what happens is then I sometimes get myself into a position where the next time they send a message or a call, I will give them, some horrific date way off in the future to be able to say, yeah, no problem. I have time for you in, let's see, December 12th, 2023 or 2024. I just give them a date. And part of that is, in some respects, it's bias, is I've already got a preconceived notion of the outcome. And so I'm trying to shape or mold the situation so that I actually do get that outcome is what I'm after. So, and that's something, that our listeners and viewing audience need to be aware of, is that there may have been some outside factors that caused that individual not to be able to show up. And, the courtesy would be to have sent a message to say, something's come up, I can't make it. But, if that didn't happen, you still have to be prepared to be able to find out what the root cause of them not showing up was, and then moving forward with the relationship.
Yeah, I understand that one. There was a place where I worked, and it was situated in such a way as that of the person who was supposed to show up today, that wasn't a guarantee, because the person who was supposed to show up yesterday shows up, and the person who's supposed to show up tomorrow shows up today, because it was all about transportation. Could people get to where I was and all that? And it was something I learned. I hear what you're sharing, for sure. Which one would you like to talk about next and give us some thoughts about it?
We could do accountability and responsibility, and I think we've started to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
So as part of the relationship, so we have two parties involved in a mentoring relationship. And so both are accountable to each other, and there's a responsibility to work together in that relationship in order to, number one, understand what the objectives are and where we want to get to. And number two, that each of us we are accountable, responsible for our part of that mentoring journey, and of us both realizing the outcomes that we're both looking for.
Yeah, I think I'll pick up on the word outcomes, and maybe I'll slip in the word consequences. So activities, behavior, consequences, if we want to use the ABCs just as a way to do things, is, the activity is mentoring, and you are sharing. Therefore, the behaviors that are exhibited by each of you is important, and to really be aware of the consequences that are going to happen as a result of that. And if you said something to the effect of, I'm going to get this done by this time, then, you're accountable to make sure that takes place. The mentor isn't necessarily accountable for the mentee, and the mentee is not accountable for the mentor, but you're responsible for each to do what you're supposed to do. And I've had a little bit of kickback on that over the years, some examples, and I had to do a little fine tuning around that with the couple of young persons I was interacting with at that point in time, because they didn't necessarily have the discipline. They hadn't sort of worked out all of that discipline of holding to that time and location, that interaction, what we were chatting about, what they were supposed to do. And that certainly comes back in terms of this fairness and justice, which is where I'll go next here in a second. But it's this notion of, you got to really think before you act, right? There is consequences here. There are outcomes. And one of the greatest ways that I always remember this one is I always pay attention to which way my feet are pointed. And if my feet are pointed in such a way that I'm interacting with the person, that's great. But if all of a sudden my body language has my feet pointed away from the person, then I better figure out what's going on. It's one of those little reminders. It's sort of like, hang on a minute, I'm talking too much, and I might pull on my sleeve and go, pull back here, pull back. I just look at my feet and figure out what's going on with my feet. Where am I? Am I trying to escape, or am I actually in conversation? It's just something that I've learned to pay attention to over the years. My body's giving me some really good clues about my accountability and responsibility. But guess what? I can notice it in the mentee as well. And that gets us really paying attention to each other. So I think what I'll do is I'll move on to fairness and justice. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. With the fairness and justice one, it's this is one that I thought was the area that I was experiencing before I figured out it was respect. It was respect to who I was as a person. But this notion of fairness is, and it pops up a lot in today's world, about play by the rules. And I sometimes see people who get a little bent out of shape if people aren't following the rules. And sometimes we see this in road rage, right? And some people are cutting people off, and then all of a sudden it escalates and escalates, which is unfortunate. And where it comes out in terms of the mentor-mentee is, if there's certain standards, inspired standards-wise practices that you've accepted to interact with each other, and you start breaking away from those and not following them, then that poses a bit of an issue that we've got to take a look at. We've got to figure out through questions what's going on, right? And I also know is that if I'm the one who keeps sharing, and this is where I learned about mansplaining, and I'm gonna admit it, there was a time in my life when I did a little bit of mansplaining. And what it was I wasn't taking turns of the interaction with the person I was interacting with. In other words, I wasn't necessarily sharing. I was, sharing and caring. I was more telling and selling. And I started picking up on that in myself and sort of really paying attention to that. And one of the keys here is in this fairness is justice. I don't want to have this appearance of taking advantage of the mentee, because in some arrangements you're getting paid, sometimes you're doing it free. But either way, I don't want to take advantage of that. So that sort of brought it forward for me. Any thoughts for you around fairness and justice?
Well, when I look at it from the idea of a practice, the aspect of fairness is we have a conversation about what it is that we're looking for in outcomes. And so in order for it to be fair and to help you be able to realize that, what typically I tell people is, help me understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish here, and then I will customize the approach that I take so that we have a better chance. We can optimize our chances of helping you realize those objectives. And so for me, it's making sure that I understand that it's not one size fits all. So I need to look at it from the aspect of, from a fairness perspective, that I will need to at some stage obviously customize or modify or change how we are working together to be able to make sure that we're able to realize, number one, that it is in fact fair, but number two, that we're going to actually realize the outcomes.
So in some sense, where I said about, pulling on my sleeve to say, hang on, I'm sharing too much, I actually are reaching in there trying to figure out, hang on, there must be some other ways that I can do this. And that's a really great point. And I forgot to mention that about the sleeve. So that was a great reminder for me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go to trustworthiness and honesty? Do you want to get us started on that one?
So, that takes us back to the definition that we shared at the beginning of the show, was the whole aspect of trust and how important trust is to the relationship, and how important it is, for both people to develop that trust. And in order to develop that trust, you need to be trustworthy yourself as the mentor or the mentee. You need to be honest and share. How I describe it is, I need to be able to share something personal about myself that demonstrates that I am a trustworthy individual, and that I approach things with honesty as one of the main points in order for us to work together to be able to move forward. So for me, it's an aspect of trust. It's an aspect of trustworthiness being one of the primary features or functions to be able to move forward, and honesty is part of that as well.
Yeah, and in our conversations, if we both agreed that we would do a little lookup of something because we couldn't quite answer the question at the time, or an issue arose that requires a little bit of research, then you got to do what you say you're going to do. That's how I also think about this trustworthy honesty, because if I'm the one who's attempting to dig out answers for the mentee all the time, that's not quite what I am looking for. This is two-way by the definition that Doug shared for both personal and professional. So I want to make sure that we're both in there, which means you got to keep your promises. This is something else, is that there's a commitment to your promises. And if you're going to do that, then that really helps to that platform, what you stand on and how you interact with one another is to come from this trustworthiness and honesty. And for me, this is one that, and I know it's written in many places, right? It takes a while to get there, but it can be lost in a second. And that's something I've always remembered. So when I enter into our time together, I make sure that I am being attentive to what's taking place. My intention is clear at this point in time, because if I've established, and we as mentee or mentee have established, I want to make sure that we don't break that trust. That's something that's really important. And it's one of the ones that I make sure that the mentee really understands, is clear from the beginning, is that if we enter into this, if not, we may have an issue, and we may have to figure out something which may actually say goodbye. And that's happened to me once, and only once so far, right? Because a couple of other times we were able to figure out what was going on, and part me, part the other person, and so that was okay. And there we go. And we unfolded that. Anything else you want to add to any of these here at the moment before we maybe go over the two bonuses?
No, that's good.
Okay. So what I wanted to share with this notion of the bonuses, if you want to call it that, all right, is hospitality and citizenship, sometimes called civility. Some people will call that. Let me do with the citizenship first. It's another way of talking about, if you're in the community, if you're on the team, if you're in the group, then be present, be there, and interact, and bring these other five really to the forefront. Sometimes citizenship is linked to, in the wider community, around things like voting and being civil. Like, I think of, okay, if it's winter time and you're in the northern hemisphere, like both Doug and I are, guess what? Maybe it might help to be a snow angel. Go out and shovel a walk, help some people out. There's this notion of citizenship. I think about it when I'm walking, and for whatever reason, we got a person in our neighborhood that keeps throwing out cigarette butts. And I'm forever picking up the cigarette butts as I'm walking along, because I don't want the birds and animals to pick them up and eat them, right? And so I make sure that they're collected. There's other things, like things like plastic bags and all that, they're floating around. I grab those. But in the mentor-mentee relationship, is that I sometimes I will stand back, which is the reflection on, and just look at, okay, we're in this relationship, we have this arrangement. Let's both be civil in it. Let's show our citizenship. Let's show our community aspects about being here. Thoughts from you?
Well, for me, it was the aspect of mentoring starts its journey at a very young age. So it can be very much in the school, and then it can work into the community. And then from the community, and school is from elementary school right into higher education and moving forward. So mentoring becomes a part of, or a way of life right through that whole span, ultimately ending up in where I'm in the organization, in the corporate world, and I'm implementing the mentoring there, because it's going to help us get to where we need to get to as an organization, but just as importantly as a person who is part of that organization.
Yeah, and sometimes we let that sort of slips by, and I think of, I appreciate, sometimes there's gossip that's good if it's used correctly, and maybe gossip isn't the word, but it's about the conversations in the white space. But it's when we slip into the gossip that tears down people and hurts or undermines situations, all right, that's when I know we've lost the civility. We're moving away from citizenship. And I pay attention to that. I haven't experienced that in my mentor-mentee relationships at this point in time, which is great. Or maybe I'm not aware of anything that's happened that would bring that to question. So it's something that is always underpinning what it is that I'm doing. So I hear you about what's happening in the workplace and organizations. Well, as we move towards the closing, again, I just remind you, if you can, subscribe, comment, like, share, whatever around this video. We always appreciate hearing from you. certainly jump over to mentorpractices.com as well if you want to learn more about what we do and certification. The last one I wanted to bring up, and it's a newer one, and not that I haven't known about it, but to really give it into a personal quality, is this notion of hospitality. And it's welcoming those who've not arrived yet. And it could be from a mentee perspective, is I may not always know who the mentee is going to be. So I have to be open to welcoming that mentee, right, into what it is that we're doing. And sometimes that mentee may show up with a little bit of arms crossed, a little bit of an attitude, and I have to welcome them. There has to be some hospitality there. But there's also the notion of hospitality in a sense, and Doug knows this one, is that they may not be in the best of shape in a sense. There may be something that has happened to them from a mental health, self-care perspective, and they need a little bit of support, and their head may be down, and they're going, okay, I have to talk to you, do I, or something like that. Sometimes it might be, I've got something going on in my life. I appreciate this one. I sought out a mentor at one point in my life because of something that was going on. And this notion of welcoming those who've not arrived yet is just being open to, you don't know what may come in around that corner. You do not know who may be phoning you. Is just be open to that and see what takes place. Thoughts?
No, it's definitely the openness and being the openness. When I say that, I think I can just sort of see, I have this image of, sort of standing at the door to the closet, and the closet door opens and there's this person inside who reaches out and wants help. And you as the mentor need to be prepared to be able to provide that help in as open of a way as you possibly can, because the person's already dealing with a lot of stuff, and to end up encountering somebody who they thought they could trust, who was going to care and have their best interests at heart, is important. And then if we start closing the door on them and not giving them that opportunity, then we're not being of service to them as in a fashion that we should. And there's no shoulds in life, in a fashion that we could.
Yeah. And I think if we bring all of these together, they all sort of weave together. It's sort of, the sense of the fibers, the threads, the strings, the cords, the ropes, they're all weaving together. And one may get a little frayed and it needs a little bit of touch up and all that as time goes by. But again, this video was in response to someone saying, could you just go a little bit deeper, dive into it a little bit more? And they asked, what are the 5 personal qualities? And Doug and I said, oh, well, we'll bring these 5, these sort of ethical values to the foreground. But there were these other 2 that we wanted to bring, because we often talk about the 7 ethical values. But the one thing that underpins this, if we just go back to the word values, is really appreciate what's your hierarchy of values, whether you're a mentor or mentee. If you come to understand what your hierarchy of values, what's most important to you, and you share the truth of that, share the worth of that, share the utility of that, then when you go to use these personal qualities, these 5 we talked about, plus the other 2, then that mentoring relationship arrangement can be like a lot of fun. There can be a sandbox in which you can build lots of different kinds of sandcastles together. You can have some great walks together. And it can actually form a friendship that can last a lifetime, because the great thing about mentoring is that the mentee can become the mentor of the mentor, who becomes the mentee. And again, I think you can start to see that weaving of all these things coming together. So that's me sort of sharing out some final thoughts. And before I get Doug to share his final, because our tradition is I bring you in, persons in, I get Doug to take us out. But just before we do that, make sure mentorpractices.com, give us a visit, take a look at the certification process that we have. Love to hear from you. If you have questions, you can go to the contact page. You can put something in there, comments, questions. Hey, if you got a funny, we love to read those as well. So put them in. And with that, we will be bringing some different courses and workshops forward over the course of 2023. So we'll be making some announcements about those. Some of them we'll give like 2 weeks notice. We're putting them up. Some of them we may be beta. Some we may be into doing them full tilt over the long term. And we'll certainly be making announcements. So stay tuned to wherever you're watching this video. You'll probably get those announcements as well. So Doug, that's sort of me closing off on my side. If you want to share the final thoughts, that will take us out. When I know you're done, I'll just say take care and I'll close off the recording.
Yeah, for me, it was and be ready for this, the weavability of all those words in, to a common place. And that's what stood out for me was each and every one that we talked about was connected in some way, shape, or form with the bigger purpose, the actual journey that a person's going on.
Great. Well, take care, everyone.